Yes, I'd like to begin by addressing a combination really of three of the questions, and then just pass it on to you. I'll be coordinating this and inviting comments, reactions, your contributions, but I think this will go. I think this will go well. I think the most basic question among all the questions is the last one on the list we received, question 12, which basically the essence of it is what is authentic OBE compared to quote conventional OBE, and that gives us all an opportunity to address definitional questions, different kinds of modifications, the alternatives within OBE, et cetera, et cetera. So when we're all together and ready to go, Mr. Sarwar, would you give me the green light and we'll do that.
Sure, please. You can start, please.
All right, well.
Thank you.
Yes, well, hello, colleagues. Thank you very much for being part of this entire endeavor and relationship that we've established with Bangladesh. We're going to be answering the questions that you have posed since the earlier presentation that we did earlier in the month. And I would just like to say that rather than considering this to be question and quote answer, I'd like you to consider that the answers really come from the deep experiences each of us have had with this. None of it, I think, should be regarded as absolute and definitive, because what we're learning is that OBE itself is constantly evolving and changing in sometimes its details, and sometimes we're understanding more and more about its potential. And therefore, what we're going to be offering you is the best guidance we can. I hope it is clear. It will certainly be substantive. And we all are eager to give you the best information and the best insights that we have. So I'll be coordinating the movement here and the responses to the 12 different questions that have come in. We've taken some time among our group to group those questions in a way because they are related to each other. And I have found that there's a grouping of 3 of them where I would like to begin. And it's about some of the most fundamental things regarding OBE. There's a question here from Managing Director Islam. Please state the differences between authentic OBE and conventional OBE. What are the important parameters that we may practice to move to an authentic model? That to me is sort of the foundational question of all of this. Related to this is at what level should Bangladesh target and practice OBE? Primary, secondary, or tertiary? That question comes from Chowdhury. And the question, what are the limitations of OBE in case of a developing country like Bangladesh, keeping intact essentially its whole system or addressing its whole system? So this is a whole system issue, and it is one in which we're talking about fundamentals. So let me take an attempt at this, and I absolutely invite my colleagues to join in on these fundamental issues. I don't know what, quote, conventional OBE is. To me, I've always taken the concept literally, and that is that the outcomes, what you desire for students to be able to learn and know and be able to do, those outcomes, the ultimate outcomes, okay, come first. They reflect your purpose, your intentions, your priorities, okay? Those discussions must, I think, proceed anything that you do in terms of, quote, implementation, okay? What is ultimately the purpose you're trying to accomplish with, whether it's university students or secondary students or primary students? What is really most essential to you and them in order for you to proceed, okay? So OBE is not EBO, okay? The education is based on the outcomes. The outcomes come first, and we base education, that is what we're going to do, what we teach, how we assess, all of that on the outcomes themselves. I think an awful lot of what we see in the world, and maybe that's what's meant here by conventional OBE, is backwards. That is, the E comes first. We already have these programs, we already have these requirements, we already have all these things. Now, what should our outcomes be, or how should we address the outcomes we've already written for the things we're already doing? So my argument has always been, and I should say my plea has always been, think through the outcomes deeply, okay, before you begin any of this. That's what my colleagues and I have done actually this month during or since our presentation with you earlier in the month. We have rethought what kinds of outcomes are we talking about, because that's going to determine the kind of OBE that you do. And we have broken it into 4 categories, I think 2 of which are particularly relevant to you, okay? One of those outcomes we call academic outcomes. And academic outcomes are basically the substance that we're teaching, the substance part of what we're teaching in our programs, okay? That is, what do we want the students to know in terms of knowledge, concepts, and analytical mental abilities that are essential to them as they move forward. And I really would invite you, our experience with that is an enormous amount of what goes into academic outcomes, and academic OBE is simply tradition. Is the tradition really shaping the future you know you need to shape and meet as a country? So I invite you, when you're thinking about academic outcomes and substantive outcomes, be focused on your future and how anything in that curriculum is really going to foster the development of the learners and the future that the country is inviting. The second kind I call functional outcomes. That's skills, that's abilities, that's the way to carry out any of the tasks, the processes, to build competence in students. And I know there's an enormous priority in the country for employment, skill building, etc. Skills require an additional thing beyond substance. They require competence building. It's why we call them 2-dimensional outcomes. That is, you need to know the substance, but the skill, the kind of actual process that you are developing, that should actually be indicating and driving some of the substance itself. The third kind of outcome gets us more into a very long range, future focused and much more complex scenario in some cases. And that is life performance outcomes. The kinds of abilities that involve complex thinking, complex configurations of different kinds of skills, etc. So what I'm calling functional outcomes are the ones that pertain to more individualized kinds of skills, and often what people call employment development, or development or skill building for certain kinds of jobs, certain kinds of fields. Life performance outcomes are much bigger, much broader, etc. We don't need to go into the details, but they are absolutely essential in ultimately performing life roles and career roles in a more complex and sophisticated way. So keep those in mind. The fourth kind really has to do with the development of the individual within their own being. What kind of person are they? Okay, how does their own inner development and their own autonomy in the world play out? Okay, seems to me, in terms of the languaging and the questions and the things I've heard, there's a balance of all four of those, but in what how you want to proceed, but they are really different. And I think it raises the question, what are your priorities, your true priorities? I developed a Spadeism, okay, a very funny little comment, okay, about that years ago, and it's still pertinent, okay? If everything is your priority, then nothing is your priority. So you need to make decisions as institutions, as a country, okay, and within even programs and departments. What is the priority? So I'm going to just make one further comment and ask my colleagues to address these issues. Should this be a whole system approach for the country? That is, you try to get every level of education involved in outcome-based, or should we focus on one particular sector of the system first, make sure that's going, etc.? My feeling is that it should be whole system, but different levels of that system should have different priorities. So let's just get to OBE itself for a second. What OBE is, and I mentioned this earlier, okay, in my basic presentation, it is essentially the consistent and systematic and creative application of four key principles in how you do the educating, in how you instruct, in how you create learning experiences, and in how you assess. May I make a comment? Assessment is absolutely different than grading. The marks you give students for what they're doing is a different issue than assessing how well are they doing what they're doing and how can we help them be better. So those four principles of OBE, I won't even go into all of that right now, okay? That's part of past reference, but those principles define the education part of it. Your big decision is, what are the outcomes? Therefore, what's the priority we're trying to achieve with those outcomes, etc. And my personal point of view is the step back from your curriculum, step back from your programs, okay? Take a step back and basically say, what kind of human beings in the long run are we trying to send into the world that meet the priorities of our country, okay, our institution, okay? Because for younger children, it's going to be different than universities, but there can be strings and streams of outcomes that go all the way through, that if we want students at the university level to do these kinds of things, we need to be developing the prerequisites and the foundational and what we call the empowering outcomes that allow those to go forward. So that's my response to this combination of the first three questions, and it touches on a number of the other questions, but we'll try to deal with them explicitly. So let me first invite my colleagues. Would anyone like to add to that specifically right now, to what I've said as a basic grounding for this?
Bill?
Yes, Lovella, please.
Actually, I prepared something. It's like, because I'm thinking it's better really that we can begin with like giving them a sort of roadmap maybe, or a methodical approach to how a system can be developed that is really outcomes-based education. So this is actually based on my experience, and maybe from here we can go down into the analytical and the critical analysis of every aspects of it, of the whole system. So if it's all right, I think I have prepared the slides. Would that be okay? Just to start off with the discussion, so that from the whole we can discuss the parts.
Yes, let's stay very focused on that, because we've got lots of questions that we'll have to be addressing here.
Yeah,
Lovella.
actually, I have already targeted questions of Professor, I think, from Sushanta Chowdhury. And then I also targeted or like address or giving insights to this question of Muhammad Faisal, and also on Kamrul Hassan, and of course on the one who asked question about the possible approach that they can do so that they can start, understanding and implementing OBE. So can I share my slide? This is just quick so that it will just give us a big framework.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So this is practically based on my experience. No matter how we are bounded with the kind of system that we are having right now, but I have simple quick steps, not to just make sure that we really are at least at the first two, or making it more on the third and the fourth most outcomes. To achieve that, I developed this this approach. So I would like to share this OBE institutional roadmap and methods at all levels. So if you have noticed, I will also be addressing some of the questions already, but to go down into the analytical aspect of that, maybe we can go back to the questions later on. So first one, we can create our institutional framework or paradigm. So this is where we can start thinking of our core values as an institution, our philosophy. Then what do we envision, the kind of society do we are going to develop in terms of what priorities or aspects of education and learning that we want to address, or to enable the thing that we envision, and the mission that we are going to practice, the purposes and the goals. So you see, this is really very important. But I think many of the institutions right now are starting at this point when they are trying to really define their contribution and their role in the society. So, but take note that I have highlighted here as guided by the OBE principle and goals, which are enabling of Bangladesh National Educational Purposes and Goals. So such as the BNQF, the Bangladesh National Qualification Framework, the NPBQF, I read about that. It's really very interesting because you are giving importance as well to national training and vocational qualification framework to make sure that the migrants, the immigrants, and both the migrants coming from your country going to other countries to work can also find more meaningful life by equipping themselves with those skills. So we can also make use of the Bangladesh educational landscape to look into the deep so that we can really define where we would like to position as an institution, local and global community relations. So there are so many things that we can actually think of when we want to really define or create our own institutional framework in our positions in the bigger community. So we can recalibrate. So my remark here is that we can recalibrate our national educational frameworks that guide our institutional paradigms as we experience authentic OBE and the changing realities. And maybe later on, I can also cite some insights how different really in practice OBE, authentic OBE from that of what is going on right now, the kind of educational system that we are having. Okay, so here.
Let me just comment, if I may, Lavella, okay?
Yes, yes.
We have always said you derive outcomes from somewhere. They come from a grounding, they come from a rationale, and that's what you're just pointing out here. So thank you. Thank you. You define them after you have derived them from that rationale and know what that rationale is. Please continue.
Okay, so the second thing that we can do to think and to examine whether our institution is in this kind of organizational thinking already. Second, we can define our priorities as significant contributions to the stakeholders of the community. So this is very important. So if you have noticed the existing dilemma right now for university, we have a lot of universities springing up like mushrooms around, and they are having duplicated redundant programs because it seems to be like more of business rather than, you know, focusing on what is really the importance of education and its role to play in the community, into the advancement of our country. So this will help us determine what or how academic programs will be developed where we can surely organize a system of support. So like our human and material resources, our learning conditions. But later on, we will see how different it is as the way we usually expect from an academic program. Okay. Number 3, we can envision, this is what Dr. Spady has been always telling us, envision the kind of learners for learning to become. They should not be like, what is it, a quality controlled products or materials produced from factory, but rather, you know, they are not just professionals or workers, but persons. So you see, this is where authentic OBE really, you know, put its emphasis on developing the total person, equipped with those skills, with those competencies, regardless of the differing levels of the competencies. And it's relevant to the realities. But what is important is the developing person, the total person, who will be molded and trained in these academic programs we called in pursuit of being capable of the actual life performance roles as life and learning goes on. So we can see here how we can actually later on, I think there is a question about, do we need to refurbish our educational system if we are going to implement OBE? Yes, I think, but we are already in some levels, and that's why we need to understand where we are right now so that we can reposition again ourselves and try to redefine, recalibrate so that we can move forward what is authentic OBE. Okay, then
let me comment there, please.
Yes.
Lavella, let me comment. If that is our goal, if it is also, and very importantly, developing the whole human being, okay, there's not a course for that. That happens throughout the entire career of the student in school, from the top to the very bottom, or from the bottom to the very top. Okay, that is something that gets integrated into everything we're doing quite explicitly. And therefore, it's why the third and fourth kinds of outcomes are important, because they are more than just sort of the substance stuff we teach in the curriculum. They are really developmental, okay? And that takes a different, I believe, kind of pedagogy and a different kind of program. Thank you, thank you. Keep going, please.
Yes, and I would like to add with that, because just like the 4 pillars of education of UNESCO, well, in fact, that is really very well defined, because the first pillar is the learning how to learn. The second is learning how to be, learning to do. That's where the performance, the demonstration. Number 3 is learning to become. That's why I quoted here, learners for learning to become who? Not just professionals or workers, but rather they as persons. So learning to become, why they need to learn to become somebody, not just because of their, white cap on their heads, labeling them, whether they're engineers, architects, but most of all, that they can learn to live, how to live in harmony with others. So that's the 4th pillar of education. And that is creating actually a kind of society that is desirable and, something ideal for all of us, but no matter how difficult it can be reached, but at least OBE can, make sure that somehow we can do something about it. Okay. I would like to go back to this because I'm talking about learning to become. So if we have to check again, if I'm going to, all right. Why I emphasize here the assessment goal of OBE, because the bottom line is one way to determine whether we really have achieved the purpose of OBE or not. Then we have to go back to its ground. And that is to make sure that every learner really has achieved this life hierarchy of learning. So if you notice, we can see here, discrete skills, structured tasks, higher order competencies, and then complex and structured tasks, and moves toward complex functional roles and life roles practically. But if you look at these 6 hierarchy, we can actually equate this into the outcomes that Bill had been talking about. And the reason I think why there is something wrong with our current educational system, because we're stuck with the kind of learning design that we create here, just simply to, facilitate the achievement of discrete skills and structured tasks. But we sometimes, there are so many gaps in between here. There are too gritty, they're too tiny, and there are too specifics really that it fails to address the higher level of life performance role. But the goal of this all is actually the achievement of the most complex functional behavior. So this is what also Bill had been talking about, that regardless whether he is a child or an adult. So if you see here, I would like also to emphasize the role of every level of education in the educational landscape of Bangladesh. So we know for a fact that we have early childhood education, and this is true and common also to all other countries. Elementary education, we have secondary education, tertiary education, and then afterwards we have continuing education and professional education, and the learning goes on as life goes on, so something like that. So from early childhood, actually, if you want to focus on a most complex functional behavior expected only for a child, then we can start thinking, we can begin thinking, what can possibly are the things or are the experiences that we can give our little children with the complex functional behavior already at their stage. I can still remember Haviggers at URI saying there is a developmental task. There's always a developmental expectations from every age, for every age. So even no matter how young the child is, it doesn't mean that we always focus on the discrete skills, but we give more meaning to that, and we define more meaningful learning outcomes for them. So it means that if there are discrete skills that should be learned by the early childhood education, then what must be the application of such skills that are more meaningful and are more relevant to the early learners. So in the same manner, we can also redesign our outcomes in such a way they can, we can allow our learners to demonstrate somewhat a most complex functional behavior at that age, while we are reinforcing also the discrete skills. And that pattern can go on and on with the different levels. So instead of just focusing on discrete skills, we give more meaningful target outcomes for every age level. So that's how I actually operationalize on the practicality of the implementation of outcomes-based education. But the ultimate purpose of this most complex functional behavior. Yes, Bill.
Yes, let me comment on this, okay? I have just written a major paper about all of this, which I'm hoping that will be in this new journal of outcome-based education. The framework, the two frameworks I'm focusing on in that paper are right here, okay? And the framework that changed OBE, I guarantee you, everything changed, is the framework on the right, okay? It was absolutely pivotal because the school district that developed this is the first framework where we ever had put out of, created out of miracles, okay, what we call performance roles. And those 5 things, they said, applied to children all the way from kindergarten through grade 12, okay? That you could organize all the classrooms, okay? And then this obviously goes on to university as well. You could organize everything around those 5 things. It just is done at a level of complexity, etc., that is appropriate for the students. But they can be practicing and applying these kinds of things everywhere, okay? The second observation quickly is those structured tasks and discrete skills over there on what we call the demonstration mountain. That was mastery learning. That's how OBE was born in the 20th century, okay? Mastery learning of Benjamin Bloom was simply focused on those things. And we developed and developed and developed it and climbed the mountain in order to get over to the right-hand side here. So this slide is profoundly important. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Yes, so in other words, we can even think of what life role an early childhood, can possibly do.
The ones on the right are all that 5th level. They're complex functional roles that we call performance roles. Those are the 5 that are over on the right. And we're not saying to you, colleagues, those are the 5 you need to do. What
Yes.
we're saying is any of those kinds of performance roles are things that you can begin developing and nurturing with young children and carry through in an entire system. That's the big message here. And Lavella, thank you for bringing that to our attention. Can you quickly complete this? Because I know we've got other technical questions we've got to address.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you, Bill. So develop program outcomes is the 3rd thing that we're gonna do. So once it's already clear to us what is it that we want to prioritize and what kind of learners we want to develop. So these are significant, complex, and functional behaviors at certain level of high expectations, but can be continuously experienced and assessed all throughout the organized educational system. So you can do a very harmonized system from elementary, from early childhood, elementary, up to the continuing level of education. So here, this is what I would like to emphasize, because this is practically how we can operate on OBE implementation in terms of how can we design curriculum. Okay, so if we try to look at in this slide, I emphasize design learning experiences, but I do not say design curriculum, because it might be misunderstood again, that we have to go back
Yes.
to our content 1, content 2, content 3, content 4. So in other words, we can be very flexible, we can be very creative in designing learning experiences that can, target the program outcomes that we want to achieve, and in what way that we can see that these program outcomes are really achieved. So they are enabling of the program outcomes to be attained and further developed. So here I emphasize applying the 4 principles of learning of OBE: clarity of focus, expanded learning opportunities for our learners, high level of expectations for student success, and design down thinking. So, well, there can be a separate training for this. We can have training for faculty, but of course, the focus will be much different on what is existing right now. So this is where the important role of mentors and experts come in. So when I say experts, they are not just, they do not just memorize books, but they are actually practitioners in the field that can contribute to the real learning for life or performances. So as they participate in the whole OBE paradigm of the institution. So this is where the nitty-gritty of preparing significant outcomes, assessment strategies, learning designs, and so on and so forth can come in. Okay, and the 5th one, I think this is not yet. I still have another one to present later. Organize a system of support. So this is very important, because when we design learning, once everything is clear to us, what are our priorities, what is it that our institution would like to contribute to the community, then we should have a system of support that can enable learning experiences to be successful in terms of developing learners' capabilities that are lifelong and highly relevant to what we want to achieve as a community, country, and the world, and even the world. These are human and material system of support, like experts, practitioners, professors, mentors. We call them the more knowledgeable others. Learning environment, we need to design that learning environment to which our learners really experience a more real, authentic environment, wherein if you can see the tools, the knowledge tools, I call that knowledge tools, they are content, and I call that knowledge tools because they become tools now in the process of achieving a more complex and functional behavior. So facilities, equipment, and so many other support that we can develop in order to ensure the achievement of the learning. So continuous improvement plan of the whole system that ensures the enabling method of developing the desirable characteristics of individuals we want to successfully demonstrate. The existing education, kind of education right now, there is also a continuous improvement plan, only that they differ on how they design outcomes, or how they achieve outcomes. According to Bill, well, it's education-based outcome rather than outcomes-based, right? So I think there's a need to reorganize our thinking about that. And so that's why I focus on the design of the learning experiences rather than on the content of the curriculum. And number 6, we can reorient stakeholders of the institution on the OBE paradigm and how things can be properly organized around. So like we can talk with community partners, our institution experts, administrators, support staffs, and so on, whoever is we think important in the process of deciding what priorities to take and what programs to create. So faculty training must focus on the development of methods and strategies and designing intentional learning experiences to target all levels of life role performances. So I think this must really require a huge participation of the big community, collaboration among all levels of education. So let me end with this slide because somebody asked about faculty training approach. Then reorientation of OBE paradigm is really necessary, understanding it to the deepest level. What is its purpose, and if we contextualize it, what is its purpose to your programs and even to the national qualification framework. So as I mentioned, we can even keep on recalibrating our national framework because everything is in process. So, it's a developing process. So develop program outcomes of significant purposes, design learning experiences, implement and develop design, develop evaluation system for continuous improvement. And the heart here is the learning experience, the design of that. And this constitutes the three of it. Define outcomes of significance, design assessment priorities and strategies, and develop learning design prototypes that work. So let me see if I have the, sorry, it seems it's not working. Okay. Okay, so I think that's it. I have so much to tell you, even in terms of comparison later on of assessment. If you have some questions, I have prepared some of it. So that's the big, I think, framework that I would like to share with everyone so that we can start answering questions up to the details.
Well, that answers a lot of the questions. Thank you very much for that. That's really tremendously important, and I hope that that we can capture that and use that again and again, Lovella. Thank you profoundly. Let me shift gears here to the top of the question list and ask Alan Rowe and Fong Mok if they would address the question, are there any universities, the question specifically was about the United States, but are there leading universities that you know about that are really doing authentic outcome-based education? Or are we are we all really just focused on, Fong, what you have called outcome-based evaluation instead of education? So please, the two of you, jump in.
Okay. If you don't mind, let me jump in first then. Because what Bill just said and Lovella just said is perfectly lined up to what I'm just going to say next. Bill, I think one of the things that we have misconception about ABET, I think ABET also try to achieve the same thing of attended OBE. They're doing the same thing. And just that people have misunderstand ABET only focus on accreditations. So in reality, they are not. If we were to look at the ABET student outcome, even though the design for professional program like electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, everything else. However, ABET never really mandated what curriculum you must have. They never do. In fact, they are actually consolidated 18 professional organizations in the nations to shape what will be future roles and the objective and the behavior of the engineer supposed to behave. So then they define the student outcome. If you look at student outcome that are mandated by ABET, for example, apply problem solving skill to the development of effective computer and based system, or for example, the comprehend ethical decisions and to the society, or the demonstrate effective communication skill, or demonstrate ability to continue professional development, or maintain a comprehension of the changing technology and the ramifications. If you look at all these outcomes demanded by ABET, that most of them, maybe only one or two, is focused on technical. The rest of them is just focused on shaping the engineer who is supposed to be. That's what ABET is doing. So effectively, but however, it's actually up to the university to define, okay, what would be the program education objective. That's pretty much what will be, Lovella just mentioned. They start from the institution missions and then they go to program development, design your experience. So ABET never mandate what curriculum is supposed to look like. You're supposed to design the curriculum and the experience to meet the outcome that they projected. Now, with that said, now which school in the United States actually doing that? Okay, first school that I think of is Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology. It basically is a private university specialized in engineering, mathematics, and science. They're located in Terre Haute, Indiana. Now, Rose-Hulman was ranked first in providing undergraduate education. Okay, most importantly, Okay, the thing I need to mention is Gloria Rogers. Gloria Rogers is best known contributor to the outcome-based assessment community. And she started the Best Assessment Symposium Rose Harmon, was later recruited by ABET. Now, ABET Symposium was the result of her work at ABET. In fact, her significant contribution include harmonizing all the terminology used in the assessment community and the creation of the ideal workshop to educate many scholars from many schools to expand the cultural assessment educations. Now, the other school on my list would be the IUPUI, that's Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis. That has the Assessment Institute that provide a significant platform and network in assessment and improvement of outcome-based educations. But why these two schools? These two schools are known for their outcome-based culture they implemented in the education's teaching and learning models. However, they are by no means reaching the ultimate true OBE. With the ultimate true OBE, you look at timeless learning. Okay, so you cannot really, the thing is, I need to make here is, you cannot really implement an effective OBE without a constructive process. In fact, Lavera just done a very excellent job and lay out the step. Okay, what are the milestones it's supposed to achieve? And then that itself is a structured process. Okay, so you do need to have a structured process for implementations. Now, I mentioned before that there's a fine line between outcome-based education and outcome-based evaluations. But in reality, they both share similar characteristics, but only with different focus in the application process. So if you look at the outcome-based evaluations, by design, it provides a constructive process for implementations. So my suggestion would be starting with a well-designed assessment process first that can drive the improvement process to achieve the true OBE that you want. So then achieving a step one step at a time, that would be what I suggest. I think I pass on to.
Yeah, let me just comment quickly before Al comments. We have always said when you define an outcome in terms of a performance role, I think that's what you're saying, Bong. Okay. When you define that, how would you know one when you saw one? That is, how would you know the person is doing that? And almost immediately in defining the outcome, you need to be developing what the assessment is going to look like. You're defining the criteria that you're looking for. So assessment doesn't have to be a whole separate thing that goes into grading and marking. I'm going to say that again, right?
Yes.
It
That's
really
correct.
is, how do we get good evidence? How do we get good evidence that this thing we've called an outcome is actually being demonstrated? We're looking for good ways to get that evidence. Al, would you like to pick it up, please?
Absolutely, and thank you, Wong and Lovella. I'm going to say this. I think that I can't think of any college or university who is not focused on student learning outcomes. I can't think of one. I can't think of one that does not already have within its own culture and walls examples of the 4 types of outcomes that Bill set out in the beginning. However, I can only identify a lesser number who are able to organize it in the manner that accreditation agencies want it to look like. But from a human experience, it is already present. And if someone asks me, how do you see it in action? Go down into interactions with human beings and have them show you the evidence, and you will see it every single day. So now, are there institutions who have taken this human-centered approach with all facets, from academic to functional to life role outcomes and the like, in the language that has been written. Maybe they get all of them, but they might not use the same language. And so we're talking about a linguistic distance that frankly can be quite artificial, but when you get deeply into the human side, it's all there. Now, so we kind of hit a point here when you're thinking about implementing OBE. Basically, you're implementing your own mindset that's present in the culture in your organization. But the beauty of all the information that has been shared, written by Bill, shared by Lavella today, and many others, is basically pretty simple. Once you as an individual or a team or a department or a program or a college, once you get clear on the work that matters so much to you and how you experience yourself on a daily basis, you start getting clear on your outcomes and the paths show up for you, and you will be awakened, because what we have been living in the traditional education system is one that has been very constraining for the time in which it was set up. And so we're now at the point where the question isn't how do you do outcome-based education to become accredited? I know of very few educators who chose the profession to have a mission to be accredited by my employer. They're more committed to the human element. So once you really start focusing in a developmental way, a research, adult, constructive, developmental way, to be able to look at yourself individually and collectively on how you are evolving in the system, and collect all kinds of ways. There's all kinds of authentic ways to collect video clips and all kinds of things. And you organize them just like any highly effective organization would do. So when it comes right down to it, I think if I was kind of pulling this together and move to the next question, I would take what Bill laid out this morning, and you might want to do this right now if you'd like, and you just take the four buckets of them: the academic outcome bucket, the functional outcome bucket, the life role performance outcome bucket, and the development of individual being as a bucket. And basically just pause, take a deep breath, and just say, right now as a professional, if I had 100 points to spend, which number would I put beside one of those? I'd rank order those in terms of where am I, or where are we right now in regard to our core emphasis as a department, a program, an institution. And I think certain things are going to reveal itself, because you have courses and those types of things, but are you focused on equipping somebody with basic skills, or are you exploring beyond? Are you into the equip and explore approach, or are you into the equip, explore, and empower approach? Or are you into equip, explore, empower, and expand? Why is that kind of mindset the necessary thing? I think we got to ask the question. How are we so certain that the past system is working so well in an uncertain world? We have to become more agile and adaptive to the world that we all live in. And so thus, getting clear on your outcomes in the manner that were described so far today, I think is very important. And it needs to be viewed as a system. There has to be a roadmap that allows you to scale up and instead of reacting, co-create and integrate. And that scale is kind of what it takes to be a leader in regard to these things. And the real work, frankly, pulling in Fong's observation is we've been highly analytical in our evaluation, chasing ways in how we prove to other people that we're doing what it is we say we're doing. And that's important because we have a lot of public monies and the like that are invested in the system. We need to be accountable every step of the way. But when you step into shifting from evaluation to the purity of assessment, the purity of assessment in the root, asadir, it means to sit beside somebody as co-creators and make something better. And so writ over those exit outcomes of significance, the ones that Lavella just shared, those do not function as a list. They function as an integrated unit that's present and can be present right in front of you each and every day as you engage one another. So to kind of draw close to my remarks would say accreditation is important. Accreditation has mastered the world of, pretty much mastered the world of what I would call quality achievement and institutional indicators like enrollment, retention, completion rates, and debt ratios and those types of things. But when we move it into the human dynamic of learning, we can only best deal with snapshots. And snapshots with organized artifacts are exactly what the business world does all the time as they brand themselves for their own products and their own services. We could benefit from some of those insights, but there is a difference between education and business. And the one thing about, it's kind of odd in this way. The one thing that I've noticed in business quite often, as cutthroat as it can be for profit, they have to work together to produce a different product and get a profit margin. In education, we are passionate about human growth and development, but we haven't been as united with that focus that pulls the energy together and the human capital to create those outcomes of significance. So when the human enterprise and the profit-centered enterprise comes together and you really look at them, we can look at our communities as being our greatest resource to come to understand our outcomes and our paths. And businesses will basically say to us all the time, you're doing a great job, but we need workers who behave and have a way of being and a belief system. They all have transcripts and they all can do things quite well there. However, we want fully functional, balanced human beings. And so just try to pull it together in that way and we can move on.
Thank you very much, Al. Everything that we've presented so far is a perfect, to me, a perfect set of explicit questions here. And one of them I'm interpreting to mean what the other question is asking. The question is basically to refurbish, that is redesign, rebuild, retool the university in order to be achieving your competencies, i.e. the things that were the higher things on the mountain that Lovella showed, Are we going to have to rebuild the university in order to do that? My assumption is good a university should be living in the world of higher order competency, but we need to be do we do need professors in students, etc. And it's hard to do with large classes. Their responses, but yes, we need to be focusing on the higher whole mountain. And frankly, we can do a pedagogy that's simply that. What do you think about that? Is that really important? Tell us more about it. Let me let and to there's a
No, you're
silly about the technical and could you be address some of those experiences with that? You're muted, Wajid.
Bill, actually, there was some static. There was some static in what you said, and we were not able to hear you for the last minute. There was a lot of disturbance.
Oh my.
I just sent you a message. So maybe you could just repeat the last minute again, because we cannot hear what you said.
All right. Oh, I'm very sorry. I don't know. All right. I made two comments. Okay. One is that there's a question here. Should cities be having to retool of teaching more higher order competencies? And I said, I believe this should actually
I think Bill, your
the
network.
center.
I think Bill, your network is a kind of some packet dropping is happening in your network. Your voice is breaking. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes. Yes.
I'm okay. Let me be silent. Wajid, would you talk more about some of the assessment questions?
Okay.
Can you hear me in that?
Yes, I can hear you.
Come in.
I can actually look into the question here, which talks about in specific how the practices of academic assessments in the context of OBE by the Bangladeshi university teachers could be improved. This is from Dr. Rajiv Loshan Das. So I'm going to address this. Can you hear me, or there's an issue with my audio as well?
Yes.
It's fine.
Am I audible? Okay.
Yes, it's fine.
The number one thing here is the national qualification frameworks. So we need to have accurate national qualification frameworks, the definition, the use of learning outcomes, the descriptors, the learning models implied, the learning domains, their levels, and a clear learning progression for the level of education and the specializations. This should first be very, very technically accurate and applicable. That's point number one. Point number two, outcomes should include live performance roles and emerging skills, relevant and appropriate technical content for that particular level of education or specialization. The third thing I would say is the language of outcomes should be accurate. In this regard, I would like to lay stress on Clifford Edelman's work, in which we are talking about both the verb and the nominal content. Because yes, you have the verb, but then if you don't have the object or the end product or the result, the verb becomes useless. So a lot of language of outcomes is very vague, and there are tons of papers out there. So there has to be an improvement in the accurate language of outcomes. Yes, ABET and all the accreditation agents are doing great job, but there is a big deficit in this area. Both evaluators, even workshops, I don't see even the ideal workshop, for example, talking about language of outcomes. So without language of outcomes, there is no OBE that you can implement. So there has to be consistent structure. There has to be a hierarchy to apply these outcomes, from programs all the way to learning activities. So there is a big gap here. Very, very proficient professors in teaching, but when you go to learning outcomes, writing them, we find a huge gap over there. So we really need training workshops in this area. Then we need to have classification of outcomes. Okay, for each specialization, what are the learning domains you want to cover? We know the Bloom's cognitive, psychomotor, and affective. That is very generic. But do we want any specialized domains? And do we need any specific levels of learning? Because some of the levels in even these models are not touched and not assessed, and not the primary objective of the assessment. So these inaccuracies create lots of problems. Then the language of outcomes is not specific, vague language, generic language, and language that doesn't allow for proper alignment. Validity and reliability of assessments cannot be achieved by this vague language. There's a structure of outcomes that have to be properly created and as well as applied to achieve this kind of tight alignment, which Bill says, with both the learning activity and the assessment. The other is there is a dearth of use of rubrics. Hardly rubrics are technically correct, are specific, are detailed. So faculty have in general not created those rubrics which they can use in pedagogy, and they can use in for curriculum development, and they can use for assessment, and they can use for feedback. So we need hybrid rubrics. They can be consisting of both holistic and analytic components. They have clear descriptors. They have a detailed, but the rubrics development is a significant exercise. Without rubrics, I said example, it's like wearing a beautiful tuxedo without pants. That's what, if you don't have rubrics, you cannot assess. You cannot assess outcomes. You don't have a picture, a technical system to assess outcomes, and you need the right technology. If you don't have the right technology, Blackboard, Moodle, they're out of date. If you don't implement embedded assessments, you're out of date. You cannot do this. You cannot measure hundreds of skills and competencies without technology. So with that said, Bill, I'm addressing the question number 3. There's another question, but number 5, it talks about affective and psychomotor. I will do that later, and I'll open the floor to anyone else. Thank you.
Wajid, Bill, may I add to
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yes, yes.
I prepared something here. I want to share to the group. Okay. I would like to present this assessment in the 2 paradigms of education. So what I have here is actually principle-based analysis of the difference of the 2. So the characteristics of the assessment should fall into the role in the teaching learning process. This is very important. So when we speak of teaching learning process, is what we call the learning design, then the methods of assessment, how do we do it, and so on. So in content-based education, just like what we are having right now, that we are having series organized of content in our curriculum. What we usually do, the role of that in the assessment is that we evaluate the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and values. And that's the reason why we keep on giving tests. right? We keep on counting, we keep on scoring. But you know, in outcomes-based education, the role of assessment is to evaluate the development of performance outcomes in structured tasks and in higher order competencies, or even in those unstructured ones. Okay, so the methods of assessment that we can observe from the content-based education, practically testing and scoring of acquired facts, concepts, skills, and values. But outcomes-based would opt to diagnose and evaluate level of achieved performance through demonstrable task processes, attitudinal dispositions, and holistic conduct of desirable behavior, the total learner. So you see, the focus of assessment is very much different in outcomes-based education when you compare it to the content-based education. Okay. Now, the second slide will tell us that as far as characteristics of assessment is concerned, the nature of the assessment task, if you look at the content-based education, I may say, we always focus on the cognitive task. That's why the issue of psychomotor and affective domain is always the issue. Because our tests, you know, our testing, our scoring in tests will just simply measure perception, probably of values of attitude, but not really the internalized values which are already in the form of actual character. But if you look at the outcomes-based education, as what Wajid said, we have to classify also our outcomes, but usually we say they are process-oriented outcomes, they are product-oriented outcomes, and there can be more. If we want to look back to our life, the hierarchy of learning for life, there can be more, but process can be encompassing of what kind of day-to-day according to all, the real experience, the day-to-day experience of what we do, how we do things, that's where we can derive our process-oriented outcomes. And the product, of course, what is it that we want our learners to show, to create. Okay, so these are commonly identified categories of our performance tasks, but there can be more, the unstructured ones. Measurement tools or instruments used. You see, for the objective test items, that's for under content-based education. I know you are very familiar with this. We have selected response test items. We have constructed response test items. So we have multiple choice, identification, and so on and so forth. But performance tasks, according to Wajid, would require rubrics. But what is so important about rubrics? They have criteria. So criteria gauge important dimensions or aspects of the desirable performance. But you see, it's so difficult to measure effect. But we have a lot of learning theories telling us that intelligent people, intelligent students may not necessarily produce something that is perfect because he is lack of attitude. Okay? So when you are looking at somebody who is demonstrating something and doing something that is really natural, that is really life-based, that's only then that we can say, oh, this guy has an attitude. Okay? Oh, this guy is good. So there is the effect there component that's so difficult to measure, but by the quality of the delivery of the task, that by itself can already give us a signal how good has been the development of affective domain has taken place. In the same way with the skills. If you put together the cognitive, the psychomotor, and in the affective domain, we can say we can really differentiate students who produce or demonstrate performance, those which are highly intelligent but lack of skills. They are, having the disposition, they are good, but you can distinguish that from those who are not only intelligent, and having the good disposition, but as well as with skills. So you see, there is a leveling or a gradation of the quality, the texture of the quality that is being created when these three learning domains are interacting with each other. So the level of performance is where we measure the qualities of performance in a particular stage of development. Okay, so we can set up some level of performance for every criteria that we want to establish. So this is more making having a more mechanistic approach of putting structures, a little structure in order to scope what we want to see in an outcomes-based education. And basis of scoring and grading, we know that we have right versus wrong for content-based education. Consistency of scoring and constructed response items is our concern. But you know what is important in outcomes-based education is the valid structured or unstructured tasks and rubrics. Because this is now where we can see how well the most complex functional behavior we expect them to demonstrate is developed. So the measure of success in a given period of time, if that is in the content-based education, we see cumulative scores with cut-off grade for promotion curriculum content, but sometimes they do not really matter in the actual work, in the actual, the real life, and how, our learners or how these individuals behave in the actual real life roles. So in outcomes-based education, we have developmental standard of qualities of performances and paces. You see, paces is very important, but it doesn't mean we leave the old phase because we are already in the new phase. No, unlike in the content-based education, even if you have already improved a lot, but when your grades are tallied and scored and put into average, the old experience, which is which is not so perfect or still affecting when you are already there, and what is most important that you have achieved that success. You see, so that's the implication of grading, of testing when we do accumulation of the scores, rather than looking at the final finished product, the final finished, a total learner that we are expecting our learner to become. Okay, so developmental standard qualities of performance. Yes, Bill.
This is Al. First of all, this is a very elegant depiction. I want to connect it to something here. If for a moment, the column there that you have called outcome-based education on the right, that particular side, there's a shift from content-based on the left to what would be called context-based education. And it's at that point, if you go back to your prior slide, can you go back one?
Okay, sorry.
Yes. If that was context-based education, and in the performance tasks, you mentioned it, there could be a C added, and it would be learner identity hyphen process effects. And it's basically everything that the learner chose to state as to the effect of what they did in context on themselves. And then we're into the human potential side of those outcomes that Bill mentioned in part 4. So in transformational coaching with people, this is the framework that I use. Content-based, and that's everything that people talk about, something outside themselves, how it works. And then on the right hand is context-based, and that's how I experience myself and others in relevant moments of time. And so I think you're right there that you're bringing all different kinds of outcomes together. But the real shift is from content to context, because one of the challenges that we all have is this. I did well in the class, I got an A, and then they put me on the job and I couldn't do the job.
Yes.
Or I passed the certification test to be a referee in basketball, and then they put me in a real game and I couldn't make the right call because things were happening too quickly. It's all about context for a lifetime. And so this is a very, very valuable piece for the whole picture of outcomes and their types and how humans relate to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Al.
If I may, I'd like to
Yes,
offer my
yes.
comment.
Yes, Fong.
Yes,
Okay.
Fong, go.
If I were to address the questions on the practice of academic assessments, in fact, there are two assessment models that you can consider for deployment. The one is, I call it GI assessment model. I name it after Gore Roger for significant contribution in the assessment community. The other one is called an FCAR assessment model, also called the enhanced GI assessment model. Now, FCAR stands for Faculty Cost Assessment Report. John Astor is the father of FCAR assessment model. Now, both models share the same essential components. First, align your program education objective with your university missions, and then followed by defining your student outcomes according to the OBE, then defining the corresponding set of performance indicators that you can measure against the success of implementing the process, data collection for assessment, and data evaluation for improvement, and closing the loop for enhancements. So however, if you do not have an assessment package, just like what you mentioned earlier, that can help you track or manage assessment, then I would suggest going with the GI assessment model. Okay, this process is lightweight and is relatively manageable with paper and pens. But if you have a proper assessment package, I will go with the FCAR assessment model, as it inherently provide more in-depth information to the area of weaknesses and concerns in your curriculums. Okay, we can talk more about these two models in other sessions. And besides, with the FCAR assessment model, you can really automate the process to a large extent. We really save time at the end for all involved. But then, due to time limitation, we cannot go into detail on the GI assessment model, and FCAR assessment model by itself is a workshop. So I just want to bring out that these things do exist.
Thank you, Fong, for giving us
Thank
a
you.
concrete model on how we can, come up with a framework in assessment. Now, this is really very important. And I think even the university later on, they can contextualize their own framework of assessment. So we can always do like being creative in making frameworks that would fit into the target outcomes that we really would like to prioritize working with. Okay. Now I would like to state about assessment principles and purposes of assessment. So in the content-based education, if you try to look at it, they also uphold clarity of learning objectives, appropriateness of assessment method, quality of characteristics of assessment tools, validity, reliability, and item analysis. I think we can make use of that as well, but it can be more contextualized in outcomes-based education. Because based on the 4 power principles of outcomes-based education, it's really very important that we are very clear on the focus, right, on culminating exit outcomes of significance. But it doesn't mean that if our learners cannot, meet that at the point in time, it doesn't mean that they already failed. Maybe the pacing is not too, it has to need more pace, or there's something that we can improve more, but not really on the grades, but more on how we can further help the child improve the performance. We can do that by expanding opportunity and support for learning success. And high expectations, of course, is really very important, because at the very beginning, if we teachers or professors are already pessimistic about our students' capabilities, then most likely what will happen, we will be discouraged to help them. And we will be discouraged to come up with more expanded opportunities and supports for our students. Now, if we try to look at the content-based education, the purpose of assessment are being laid down here. We have diagnostic, that's used to like in math, we always keep on giving tests, pre-tests before we conduct lessons, because you have to see what are the skills that were not achieved. No, we are so very mechanical, but in fact, when my approach became outcomes-based education, I focus more on real-life problem solving at different age level, and coming up with a strategy on how to learn discrete skills and knowledge. But the most important thing that my students, I want them to learn how to solve problems and to find problems as well, by making use of this discrete, knowledge and skills that would help them achieve for that problem solving performance. Placement, we use it to, to select students and place them into particular category. Then formative, that is when we want them to develop, but I don't think well, by name, yes, we heard it, but sometimes this is less used, no, the formative assessment, because it still would go back to scoring, and the score would tell us about the real problem. And the worst is the summative. The summative test, where we tend to accumulate the scores and we base a performance on the grade. But if you look at the outcomes-based education, as Wajid said, I'm so happy Wajid mentioned that even the rubric can be made as a strategy to learn, because I consider outcomes-based education as a reinforcement of learning. We make use of our assessment strategies, whatever mechanistic steps that we use. We can change our view on how we look at what we get from our students and use that as a way to reinforce the learning. And I use assessment as a strategy to improve learning. So I give them experience to be reflective, self-paced, self-regulated, and self-directed. So these are the principles that I really developed and I've been using since the very beginning, when I realized that all these things, the numbers, the scores, really are not helping much, helping our students to be successful in learning. So I think this is all that I have prepared, those 4 slides that I think can give us a framework on how to evaluate where we are right now in terms of assessment practices in our classrooms.
Lovella, thank you. This raises 2 or 3 very big things to put in. The word is absolutely is when all the way to home and to get to home point we accumulate where every will, I mean, sorry, the so we need want this and every all mistakes they should do that. Other thing we have not said, which issue is that our
Bill, excuse me, you're not audible.
opportunities.
Yes, Bill, you're not audible. I'm so sorry, but we could not hear anything what you were saying. So,
Okay.
Dr. Server, do you think if Bill just reconnects, it will resolve?
Bill, do you have any alternative internet Wi-Fi connection, or this you have only one single connection?
Or we can just reconnect. Sometimes it will resolve by reconnection.
Yes, I
If we
think
just come out and come back in.
I think Bill may try it. Yes.
Do you think you could try that? Just come out and come back in.
Just in, just end.
Just exit and come back in again. Sorry about that. We just need a few minutes.
I think it will also be better if Bill just closes stops the video and only keeps the audio open. That might improve the voice quality. Yes, he's in.
Can you hear me?
Now looks good. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, and it
All
looks
right,
good.
I'm very, very sorry for that.
No, it's fine. It's nice.
I was making 2 points. Please forgive me. One is the tremendous difference between cumulative and culminating. Cumulative means we are going to add up and average all of the mistakes the students have made while they're learning to do the thing we want them to do in culminating. So my Spadeism for that, okay, is the more things you average, the less you know about anything, because you're averaging all kinds of different things while they're trying to get to the culminating. The other fundamental issue is that education is time-based. It is driven and defined by the clock and the calendar. And we're trying to be outcome-based inside of a time-based system. Therefore, the whole issue of expanded opportunity is a fundamental issue about what do we do when the semester runs out, and what do we do the year out if the students haven't really reached the highest level they possibly. Culminating to me, it means how good do we want them to get? Can we get everybody up to the point? And the only way we're going to do that, I believe, is, yes, we have to teach better, etc., but we have got to create this thing we're calling expanded opportunity experiences. We're going to have to do what we were doing in primary schools, okay, 40 years ago with mastery learning, and having teachers grade in pencil, not in ink. That is, the grading, the assessment, the initial things they do is temporary, okay? We don't want it to get to the permanent part until they've really reached that higher level. So I'm going to say that one of the biggest challenges you have as an institution anywhere, whether it's primary school, secondary school, or university, is how to create a strategy and a system of expanded opportunities. How can you let students have legitimately second chances, even third chances, with proper assistance so that they can reach your culminating level? That, to me, is absolutely fundamental. We have tried to be outcome-based inside of a time-based system. And that's incompatible. So let that be my contribution, and ask Wajid if you would go back to that fifth question that you mentioned about, can we assess some of these things online, especially the things that involve not simply true false questions, okay, but real performances, and things that, the reference in the question is, what about the affective or the psychomotor domains? What do you think is possible to assess there, or is online simply limiting us from being able to assess those things well?
Okay.
So Wajid,
Thank you.
please
Yes.
go with that, and Lovella, you may want to, and Al, you may want to, you may all want to comment on that. Please.
Thank you very much. Now, I just want to point out that even if you leave the online, tools and assessment technology, just the education traditional systems are not doing very much to assess the affected domain and the psychodomain properly. That is the first point. Now, when you come to online tools and using, you can say, technology for assessment, digital technology, we should have a very precise planning, management, and observation mechanism, laid out clearly. So without proper planning for the learning activities, for the type of skills, the standards, and drawing out the plan with the rubrics, we will not be able to achieve the quality of assessment which we want. The tools, it could be YouTube videos, it could be live interviews, it could be peer, feedback surveys, it could be certain kind of products, prototypes, it could be results, data collected, it could be simulation. Yes, there are many things that could be done, even online. So, for example, let's look into the affective domain. Affective domain is not very well understood by many faculty members. Even the internalization part is exhibited in many activities. It is exhibited. If you look into communication, that's at the highest level of internalization. Somebody defending a thesis, somebody defending a project, somebody explaining a product, somebody explaining experiments, or showing results, functionality. So all that is communication. Could be reports, could be audio records, could be video records, could be discussions, question answer sessions, vivas. All of these could be used. Again, you need to have the right rubrics. The rubrics need to mention clearly what are the indicators for a good job done, for a good performance. Unfortunately, there's lack of preparations. We don't have outcomes assessment specialists in campuses, in many campuses, and many schools disregard this as some area of work as well. Now, if you look into teamwork is also affective domain, being leadership qualities, collaboration, respecting diversity, completing roles, again, peer review forms, because we actually developed this, we implemented this, and this can be done online. I have managed the summer training courses. We have meetings completely done online. We have the meeting minutes. We have actions. Then we have tangible results of actions. We have whole systems are available, but unfortunately, these are not used, not integrated. The technologies that we are using are not adequate, you can say, to integrate this. The whole comprehension is not completely available. So with this said, team contract, for example, team contract is a very critical example of an effective domain. How do you define team roles? How do you define? So all of these are actually available in assessment instruments that have to be created for online application. If you look at professional ethics, now you have a final product. There has to be some standards of the final product. There are ecological impacts. There are environmental impacts. There is sustainability issues. There are many things that can be extracted just from a product. So all of that can also be psychomotor. You can look into experiment assembly. You can look at assembly of equipment. You can look at operations. You can look at PPE, protective equipment, because we're actually doing this. We are doing these things. So when we don't have that comprehension, when you don't have the tools, when you don't have the rubrics, you think, oh, you cannot assess that. It is not true. We can assess it. There is limitation. Now, if you look into industrial participation and social distancing and pandemic, this is a different ball game altogether. Now, in this case, you cannot get the corporate environment. You cannot get real, problems, complex problems of industries. You cannot get that environment because, of course, social distancing is an issue. So yes, but otherwise, there are ways just by looking at data. There is a ways you can interpret by looking at data whether the work, psychomotor work, the observation is a very big skill. If an engineer does not have a proper observation skill, it can create a catastrophe. So observation, we can look at the data and we have actually created those rubrics. In our institution, we have done those full scale. For capstone projects, we have done full scale, amazing. We have spent 700 hours. We have prepared we also got a national award in an international conference. And we have done the whole, and it will take several days workshop to explain the whole process. So yes, we can do psychomotor, we can do affective. There are limitations, however. There are limitations which you will not get from a direct personal experience of mentoring, of advising, but it's not totally, you can say, impossible. And there are levels of, learning that can be achieved. So with that said, it requires very good planning, very good understanding of the indicators of the different activities of learning, and selecting tools and the right technology, integrating these and capturing that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wajid, answer one very simple question, and then I would like you to answer question number 6, and Lovella touched on it, but answer question number 9. Can any university in Bangladesh open a local chapter with IN4OBE in order to get our support and guidance, etc.?
So should I go to this chapter question right away?
Yes, answer that. And
Because
then I'll...
Okay, because you had mentioned something about question number 6 and 7. Regarding chapters, IN4OBE, it works through chapters and their affiliates in any national jurisdiction. Now, for the sake of Bangladesh, we have considered very carefully the whole country as one jurisdiction. So we have one chapter right now, United International University. We will have our annual review. We will review what the scope and what the activity and what the future prospects are, and decide upon that meeting that how the jurisdiction would be maybe divided, or how we would implement this. But at the moment, there is one jurisdiction for the whole country of Bangladesh, and institutions can actually approach the chapter, can benefit from direct interaction with IN4OBE through the chapter. It's still direct because we would again get involved, the resources, the consultancy, the experts, the events and activities, all of that would be full benefit for the affiliates. However, the business model is a little different. And but regarding the support we give, it is a full 100% support. The same support we give to chapters, we give to affiliates. The affiliates actually support chapters in promulgation and practice. And we are going to very soon come up with a roadmap to chapters and affiliates on how to climb up the OBE ladder to achieve the real transformational purpose of OBE. We will be providing that to all the chapters because we need both intention, infrastructure, logistics, as well as we need the determination to be able to promulgate and practice authentic OBE. I hope that answers the question, Bill.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. The answer is become an affiliate of the chapter.
Yes.
Okay, become an affiliate of the chapter in Bangladesh. Perfect. Could you touch on question 6? Okay, the Bangladesh National Technical and Qualification Framework. Okay, what role does it play? How can it continue, or what role can it play in this entire picture of bringing OBE to the country?
Actually, national qualification frameworks should play a very crucial role in implementing authentic OBE, in implementing OBE, in helping developing curriculum in throughout all the educational levels. However, the current models of national qualification frameworks, which took a huge leap with the European Union, and then all the cascade of all these more than 100 countries coming up with their own qualification frameworks, but the current definition of qualification frameworks is just some culminating qualifications, which may or may not be achievable, may not be perhaps measurable. The domains of many of these frameworks are creating some kind of redundancy. We have a paper published in 2016 with the American Society of Engineers for Education. We created a learning domains wheel. How do you select learning domains? And how do you align these learning domains to development of curriculum, development of pedagogy, development of assessment methods? So if these learning domains are not selected properly, the whole, you can say, effect of the frameworks creates a lot of confusion for all the specializations, education levels, because maybe those domains are not the same for different specializations. Perhaps the learning levels will not be identical for a K through 12 or a medical, profession. So these things have to be looked into more deeply. Then all of the qualification frameworks talk about the learning qualification frameworks being a guide for developing learning outcomes. We don't see that at all. Even the language of qualification frameworks, I'm not talking specific to any country here, but I'm talking in generic terms, that the language has to improve. The domains should not have redundancy. There's a big confusion in skills, competencies, and outcomes. Competencies should not even be there in national qualification framework. Competencies are too precise, and national qualification frameworks cannot prescribe them. Even the educational levels, they don't have any learning progression. For example, they're talking about level 8 or a PhD level. How do you come to those culminating qualifications? There's no indication, there's no guidance. So without that guidance, how do you implement into curriculum? Where is the guidance for the accreditation bodies? How can you even, and where is the integration of live performance roles or emerging skills? There's a big gap in the current qualification frameworks and emerging skill requirements of different industries. That is not even addressed. So with this said, if we can fix these things, then we can actually get an application of the qualification frameworks. Otherwise, this is a showcase thing which many countries are doing. And when you look into accreditation and application, there are tons and tons of paper, and I'm reviewing this right now for a ministry project. And there's an existential gap between education and industry and the society and the community. That's all, Bill. I don't want to add any more here.
I have a recommendation to make about this that I think cuts through much of the both confusion, the inconsistency, the details, it's all the things you've mentioned that are problems. All right. And that is, if the country, if its major decision-making bodies, if they would agree that the most important thing to do would be to establish a set, a framework of real life performance outcomes, which I will absolutely commit to assisting in that process. Those life performance outcomes will contain the affective and domains, that is, they will contain the kinds of quality attributes of people as well as the performance roles of people. And if we build and design a good set of those, they can apply to a whole set of fields. You want your medical people to do that. You want engineering people to do that. You want humanities people to be able to be those kinds of people and performers, but they do it with a different set, in some cases, a different set of technical tools, i.e. skills that they build. They do it for a different set of substance, but it would develop a cohesive framework around which to operate. The same kind of thing, I'm guessing, should be then used to influence how national qualification frameworks actually frame themselves. Okay, away from the separate domains of separate domains of separate domains, and actually talk about the human beings we want to develop and send into the world to make a difference. So that's my big recommendation. Okay, I don't really think you're going to proceed with a quality kind of OBE unless you address all four of the kinds of outcomes that I mentioned at the beginning, and especially how outcomes 3 and 4 really can shape what we do then with outcomes 2 and 1. That's what design down at the kind of macro conceptual level would mean for me. And I think it's in what Lovella showed, in what Al shared and Fong shared. I think that absolutely would create a coherent and doable strategy for you. Thank you.
Just one last thing about the European Union. The city FOP organization, they have a huge report in 2018 on all the qualification frameworks. I was shocked to see that metacognition starts with the PhD. So in their frameworks, they don't have any metacognition all the way from kindergarten to even the master's or graduate level. So there's no metacognition, there's factual, conceptual, and procedural knowledge. But metacognitive knowledge starts with the PhD. That looks very, very strange. But just to mention to you, the paradox in this qualification framework situation, and I don't want to go into specific countries, but each country has a lot of amazing paradoxes implemented into the qualification frameworks.
Are there any other comments any of you would like to make? Have we missed anything about and really not addressed any of the questions? I think we've touched on the essential part of each of the 12 questions that we received. But I welcome any further observations about that. This has been thorough and lengthy and wow, so full of substance.
Bill, just the
that.
last question, since Elias is here, it is a very crucial question. Please state the differences between authentic OBE and conventional OBE. What are the important parameters that we may practice to move to an authentic model? I think that's
what I began with.
Yes, I wanted to benefit from Elias also, since he is here.
Oh, okay, all right.
Elias is here.
It seems
muted,
he has
Elias.
not heard it. Yeah, Elias did not hear.
It's on mute, if nothing else.
Yeah, please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Elias, can you hear us?
Yes,
Can you
yes, I
hear us?
can.
Okay.
Sorry. Well, I risk repeating what has been said because I joined it a bit late. Not a bit late, late. Yeah. So thank you very much for having this opportunity, this powerful session, getting together to talk about these beautiful questions. the issue of having authentic OBE and conventional OBE, my contribution could have been to try to reflect on the experience that we have, partly in the Philippines, but I think it's a story that you get all over the world about OBE. In the Philippines, from the beginning of around 2012, when the government decided to embrace outcome-based education, there was the notion that, recognition that outcome-based education, authentic, is something that can really help to transform the educational sector, that can help to transform, to bring out the very best out of the learners and make the educational system really bring people to the highest level of a sense of human consciousness. But at the same time, there was this notion that there is a way of doing outcome-based education by way of simply being eclectic. And by that, they meant more or less selecting some aspect of outcome-based education that you can do and other things that you cannot do. So I think the challenge has been in that respect, that there is no way you would actually do simply so-called eclectic outcome-based education, because if you have to be authentic or outcome-based education, which means you implement all the different dimensions of outcome-based education, everything that you think about, you wake up around, based on the outcomes, then you cannot really conceive of outcomes that are eclectic. Because if you say eclectic, it's really basically, it's more like saying, you know, I'm going to have a human being who is eclectically qualified, eclectically competent. In other words, you cannot really, if your commitment is to help build a certain type of medical doctors or a certain type of technicians, a certain type of engineers, you really cannot speak of having engineers who are eclectically competent. You would be thinking about having the most qualified, most competent engineers. But that means that that changes the way you approach your design up to the implementation process. So it means that you are willing to really go far enough to implement all the different aspects of authentic outcome-based education. And I'm sure that Bill has talked about the different components. What really make an outcome-based education has to have really those four elements of outcomes, or elements of the philosophy of outcome-based. So, for example, having high expectations for everyone. You would not want to have an engineer who hasn't reached high levels of expectations, because then you are going to have buildings falling on top of people's heads. Okay, but if you are going to have really highly competent engineers and every engineer has to achieve those levels of outcomes, then you can be confident that every single engineer, every single technician, every single driver you have on the street is highly competent. So that has been one major observation that I think like it's an example you find happening in many aspects, in many parts of the world, where the objective of trying to implement outcome-based education falls short of really going far enough to try to consider all the aspects of outcome-based education, which actually make it become outcome-based. So that's, I would think that, for example, in the field of bachelor's degree programs, master's degree programs, and doctorate levels, and then you compare that with providing skills training. There has been a general notion that if you are training people to become, for example, technicians or so-called skilled individuals, then you don't have to think about the cognitive aspect. You don't have to think about building them up in terms of their cognitive. We have a thin expectation that technicians don't need to be cognitively well developed, because after all they need to have are skills. So that in a way confuses things a bit, because a technician usually tends to be a person who is highly skilled in let's say, fixing things. But you cannot fix if you don't have the high cognitive level, right? So because you want to repair a car, you need to be cognitively competent in order to consider what you are looking at and imagine the solution. So skills need to be based on knowledge, because knowledge informs what you do informs what you know. So that kind of understanding has been a bit more a source of confusion. So if we have to think about authentic outcomes, then we have to think about really the nature of the human being that we want to see, who is professional, who is competent. And this become a more holistic way of looking at how human beings are developed. And it become in a way, not just academic, but it also becomes spiritual. It becomes really about being a human being who is fully human and fully developed in all possible dimensions that are there to function effectively. So I think that's what I thought resonate with this question in my thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elias, we're sorry you couldn't be here earlier. I know you had a lot to contribute, and I know you've got a major role to play in moving our work forward. So thank you for joining us. Colleagues, do you have any other further comments you have, or
Question
I
10.
will ask Bangladesh people, do
Bill,
you have any last minute questions?
Bill, we have question number 10, which is not addressed yet. Will Bangladesh adopt the open educational research system integrated with skill-based learnings?
Yes, I tried to address that in the, I think that's been addressed. First of all, I don't exactly if you understand that question better than I did, then I think you should say, you should offer something more. To me, that was talking about, do we want to promote self-directed developing? Do we want learners to inquire more and develop their ideas, etc., or simply teach standard curriculum? Did you understand that question differently?
I thought it was also something referring to the mechanism of academic research, faculty doing academic research, and maybe connecting that with skills. Does that relate? Maybe any one of the Bangladeshi colleagues could make us understand this point.
For me, not yet possible to clarify it. If Professor Mutahar can contribute.
Does anyone else have a better clue to what that question is asking us? Open educational research system integrated with skill-based learnings. Okay.
My general guess, I was trying to make sense of this question, reflecting on this question, but one of those reflections that I had was the experience I have in the field of doing academic research, where we are trying to train and encourage our students to engage with research as the highest form of expression of learning, which is, if we are following the typical taxonomy of learning, especially when you look into the Bloom's taxonomy version of 201, which has actually tried to put the concept of create at the apex of learning, and then remember becoming like the lowest. In the old taxonomy, the 1956, we had the concept, a notion of knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation become like on top of the apex. But in 201, they moved from nouns to talk about the verbs, which I think lines up very well with the outcome-based concept of 1986, where we talk about an outcome as a culmination demonstration of learning. So in this respect, research become much more higher than simply teaching our students knowledge or bringing them to something that we have consciously developed in our cognitive space of a subject or a course that we teach. And so create become like moving them beyond just the cognitive space to contribute new knowledge, new understanding to the field of experience. Now, in this practice, what it seems to me that when we are teaching research on all levels, there has been two types of research orientation that we find. On one hand, there is something I've come to recognize as input-output orientation. And there's another side that I recognize as outcome impact orientation. What I mean by input-output is really more this stuff we do in partial fulfillment of some requirements. It's research done for publication, doing research for publication, doing research for recognition, doing research simply for the sake of doing research, right? But when you're looking at research as an outcome, is really driving and encouraging and inspiring our learners to do research that addresses some of the needs of humanity, that opens up to new consciousness, to new awareness. This type of research tends to be much more embedded in the deep human aspirations and human needs. I was looking at NASA, for example. NASA has been known to be a research institute that does research for the sake of research. But when I was looking at the criteria they use to approve financing or funding of projects, they tend to be also conscious of the future promise that a particular research or investment in research can drive. Unfortunately, in much of what we are doing in teaching our young people research, we tend to be highly on the level of simply doing it. There is a format that you have to fulfill so that you have your research. There's chapter 1, chapter 2, up to chapter 5, or there's chapter 1 to chapter 4, that's it. And then the idea of what is it that people are contributing to the knowledge or addressing human needs or trying to expand our awareness, that tend to be much more, in a way, minimized or not even considered in many cases. So there's much emphasis on methodology at the expense of the outcome or the impact that the research undertaking is oriented to. So when I looked at these two things, I felt like, yeah, maybe an institute that is highly conscious of, is driven towards becoming much more outcome-based is more likely as well to try to consider research more as basically a way of improving the quality of life of humans, a way of expanding our consciousness, our awareness, where research is considered on the basis of how much it can contribute or it can add value to human life, rather than simply a compliance of you meet chapter 1, chapter 2, or any kind of formatting that is provided. So, and I thought that this question may have something to do with that dichotomy that we're encountering right now in many of our higher educational institutions, but also in terms of undergraduate and high school or elementary school, where research is being taught simply as processes and procedures. And students get tired of just doing it because they say, wait a minute, research again. It appears like simply a whole ritual that students have to do and feel very happy at the end of it. But we have lost that deep spirit of thinking about research as creativity, research as innovation, research as expansion of awareness. So yeah, thank you very much. That is one point that I thought this particular question could be feeding in.
May I say something?
Please.
My take on this question is that since we are, given that we are having a pandemic right now, and there has been an explosion in the use of the open educational resources. My take on this question is that they are asking if they can make use of the open educational resources, maybe a research-based way of looking at how skill-based should be or skills should be learned. So it's like, can we use the educational open educational resources so that we can integrate that in the learning of skills, something like that. Not really on, well, that's one point also for Elias, wherein the focus will be really on researching while they are learning the skills. But I think my take is they are asking whether they are going to adapt that open educational resources so that they can be integrated in the process of developing programs or how to learn the skills. So like, for example, the technical vocational aspect. Because what I would know, they have already curriculum in place on a very mechanistic process to learn skills. But the point here, the question is it possible that our learning of skills can also be knowledge-based informed, research-based in way of learning the skills, something like that. So maybe I would like to hear anybody from the university. International University, what's your take about this question? Because skill-based learning is, national technical vocational aspect, something like that. You have also put a lot of premium in your national framework.
Well, I could only comment in this regard as Lavella's question circulates through the people from Bangladesh, but as she mentioned, OERs, open educational resources. It's very popular in higher education. Where I was employed, we had an OER initiative to drive quality and innovation throughout the institution. And it was largely led primarily by our librarians and media literacy people. And what it was intentionally conscious effort to keep the entire organization and all faculty and leadership fresh at the edge of change. And it's one of those things that it's kind of self-organizing, and faculty and others really thrive in that environment. So in essence, if I was putting myself in the perhaps the Bangladesh person's question or others thinking about it, it'd be, wouldn't it be interesting if there was an open educational resources initiative from the get-go? As you start moving ahead, you might just, if organized and managed correctly, you might just discover that when you get a whole collective of people working on something such as OBE or anything, that they find their own identity in all the exit outcomes and outcomes of significance that we've been talking about, because at the heart of OER work is quality, and it's being driven by quality to live at your growth edge, future focus, and innovation. And so, but I don't know the source of or the intent of the question, but it sparks a lot of thoughts within me and would excite a certain segment of faculty very much. And that's so needed when you take on a topic like this one. You're really living out OBE at its highest form if you light this thing up. So.
Yes.
Thank you, Al. Thank you. I would like to offer just one quick comment back to Elias about something that I presented, I believe, in the former presentation I did earlier in the month. It's very interesting to me that I started with Bloom's taxonomy and said, this is no way to develop outcomes. and no way to develop outcome-based education, because it doesn't really have anything to do with the doing part. It's only about categories of mental processing. And I built and created, by taking it apart and putting it together differently, I created the life performance wheel, which is a framework of essential performance roles that people play in any kind of adult life role or career. Half of the wheel is what I'm going to call interpersonal competences. Now, see, people may have taken them and put them into some domain or other, but I want to get them out of the domain into what people really do. And what they really do is operate as teachers and mentors and negotiators, etc., all of which require different kinds of interpersonal skills that you can't learn in a book. Okay, they're interactive. We have to develop them interactively. So maybe I'm just singing my own song here, but I really believe that if you develop a good framework of life performance outcomes, you will build into it all of these essential things from all of these domains that actually translate into human beings functioning well in their lives. That's what matters. The domains don't matter. The good functioning, really high integrity, highly capable, cooperative, compassionate human beings, that's what the world needs. It doesn't need domains. So our work has been to take the abstract character of a lot of this academic work and built it into how human beings really function, really develop, and really perform. That's what I think we have to offer that I won't say it's unique in the world, but it's a very, very significant framework that we can bring to what you're doing. Do we have any other things that need to be said
Bill?
here?
Yeah.
Or
Bill,
yes.
Professor Islam would like to say, I think he was raising his hand just a while ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Dr. William Spady and your team. Actually, I tried to communicate with the person who has asked the question, that is, will Bangladesh adopt the open educational research system integrated with skill-based learning? So
Yeah.
this question is really ambiguous, but I called him just a few minutes back. She told me that actually her concern is, for example, not only in Bangladesh, in every country, some people are joining the top-ranked universities. Some people are joining in, medium-ranked universities. But ultimately, it should be skilled. The people should be judged based on their skill. But rather, we judge the people based on the, the degree or from which university the student has achieved their degree. So this is one part. So she is trying to, get some clarification that in Bangladesh, is there any possibility to adapt the open educational research system where the privileged group and underprivileged group will be coming together and they can, develop their, research skill, in touch of the privileged group. And what is the impact of the skill-based learning here? It's not basically, it's not basically connected to the outcome-based education, but it is one of her concern. Maybe it is related to the national qualification framework or something like that.
Well, let's step back. Let's step back and look at the absolute essence of what OBE was about back in the birthdays of it when that happened with Benjamin Bloom. It was an all students can learn successfully model. It was a philosophy of wanting all students to become high-level successful learners. The way that was going to happen is we had to do business differently in education. The standard model, time-based education, curriculum-based education, wasn't doing that. So OBE has been an opportunity expansion, high expectation philosophy of education. That should mean we open access to, okay, these other opportunities for whoever the learners are and for whatever the community is that they come from, okay? OBE has been criticized because it is too egalitarian, okay? There are people who love the hierarchy of being smarter than other people, better than other people, more wonderful than other people. And that's how the world's societies and cultures have operated. This has been, that's a human contrived thing. We can change that. And Bloom's commitment, as small as it was and focused only on elementary schools and small children and just the curriculum, it was the birth of something that has become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and has more implications. And now universities everywhere are talking about it. But they're still talking about it, I believe, in a time-based hierarchical way that we can change if we want to. Your country can use this vehicle however it wants to use it to upgrade the whole society, okay? To give opportunity to learners that would not normally have it in a selection-based system. So that's the best I can offer you in terms of the essence, the philosophical in the heart essence of what OBE is about. We want all learners to be successful and to be successful at the things that really matter the most in their societies. How can we create those opportunities for that to happen and develop a system that brings that forward? That's the big challenge. That's the big challenge. That's why the O has to precede the E. That is the outcomes, what you really want to do, your purposes and your intentions. That has to precede how you're already doing education. We're all doing education based on 19th century European thinking. 19th century European models and templates and values and understandings and structures. That's what the education systems of the world are based on. And we're trying to make that happen in a 21st century world. And it's insane. We have opportunities to change the future with a different concept of what education can be and how it functions. Okay, Al used the word, I think it went by too quickly. Almost everything we learn in education is external to who the human being is. All the subject matter, all the disciplines, all that technical stuff, okay, that's out there. It has to be brought in. But what about the parts that are already in? How do we bring them out? So this just shifts the whole thing around. It opens doors of opportunity and paradigm thinking that haven't been there. We're trapped in a time-based, selection-based, curriculum-based system. Okay, that is archaic in terms of what we know about human potential, what we know about learning, and what we know about life performance. I mean, you have a golden opportunity to turn that around if you choose.
Bill, I have a question. I need an advice from you, actually. Sorry.
Go.
So my video is not working. It's malfunctioning. So
Yes.
my advice, the need of advice is, you see, one part is the policy making. Our policy making agencies, you know, they're government bodies, and very difficult to suggest improvements into there or talk things like that. This is a very big challenge for us.
Yes.
This is one side of this.
Everywhere.
Yeah, it is one side of the story, but we will try to make them aligned with the requirement of the clear understanding of OBE in order to implement these frameworks. We'll try that out. And the other side of the story is that the implementing organizations like that, mostly we are dealing with the universities, departments, faculties, and teachers. They want to know about the real implementation approach, like Professor Wazid, Dr. Lovella, or Professor Alan or Professor Mack mentioned, like how to design the rubric, how to design my assessment, what are the relation with designing the assessments and achieving the outcomes. So these are very basic things people need to know in different disciplines. So there are the two sides of the stories. So my advice to you that how can we as a chapter approach or approach these two problems with the help of yours? Yes, please.
Okay, number one, I would invite your key governmental officials and politicians to participate directly in a major seminar on what OBE really is and on the big picture issues that we have been talking about here today.
Okay, okay.
The education systems of the world, in part, have been captured by, driven by, limited by the thinking of governmental politicians. Because the government, we say, pulls the strings, okay? They make things happen, they provide the funding, etc. And their old prejudices and biases and orientations and priorities all get dumped on the education system, okay? They need to be educated about this perhaps more than anyone else. And if you could bring them into a process that genuinely, okay, informs them about this and engages them so that we can answer their questions about this, that I would welcome that. I would welcome that, absolutely.
Okay.
Here is my final Spadeism of the day about the university professors who all want to know how to do this and how to do this and how to do this. We built this movement around a very simple Spadeism. Why drives what, drives how. And when we started doing OBE, everybody wanted to know how to do it. Oh, and how to do it, and how should we do this, and how should we fix this, and
Yes.
how. Nobody was talking about the why. Nobody was talking about the what. See, they just assumed, oh, the reason we do it, because education is just here. I mean, we have our curriculum. There's the what. How do we do it? How do we do it? This is asking us, if you really want to bring this to life and make it happen, you have to deal with those issues that Lovella was raising and everyone else on our team has been raising.
Yes.
What's the reason you want to have outcomes? What's the kind of human being you want to send out the door that will make a difference in your society and in the world? Okay, what's the basis? Okay, why are we doing this? What's the rationale behind the outcomes? And then what should those outcomes be? Then we can talk about the how. Now, there are some how things we can teach people that will make things better for what they're already doing. But the question is, are they really doing what could be a different kind of priority and conception about the educated person that goes out the door? That's the kind of question. We can raise all of those. We've got how stuff, what stuff, and why stuff. It's the why that's critical to start with if you're going to be outcome based. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
May I add into my comment on this one here, just echoing what Bill had just said. I think it's critical, say why first and then what and then how. In fact, that is the bottom line, the difference between the outcome-based education and outcome-based evaluations. Most of schools do how without asking what and why. That's why they focus on outcome-based evaluations. The fine line is actually there. I think Lovella already built a very nice roadmap for institutions. You start with the design experience and those 4 blocks. I think the first thing is why and what the university, the institution need to engage into a general dialogue for all the programs. And first design on the top, what are the main objective mission the university trying to achieve for each college, for each program, what are the basic intended outcome they try to achieve based on OBE. Once those are defined, I think next logical step will be for faculty to engage into how to achieve all those. This could be possible roadmap to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you.
Alan Rowe put something in the chat box here for everyone. Al, do you want to amplify that?
Which comment was that and how far
About
back?
the book, the upgrading book.
Oh, okay. I would, if you really want to get down to the deep shift where all of this kind of manifests itself, there is a movement, and I gave a resource in the chat box. It's called ungrading. Stop ranking people. And so these are the stories, largely in higher ed, where people have stopped grading, and it describes their realizations about what that means. Imagine this. You are teaching a class, or let's say you're an employer who evaluates everybody and give ratings. What if you stopped doing that? By the way, a lot of places are. But what happens is the first wave that comes back to faculty is, oh, if they don't have grades, how am I going to motivate them to learn? Oh, if there's no grades, I have no way of controlling them. Oh, they might not even come to class. So all the real human realities are manifested down into, we've built a system that is time-based, curriculum-based, credential-based, and tied it up in a nice bow that's called, it's egocentric. You got to do what I want to do because I'm going to grade you, rank you every single day. And then, as Bill said, we're going to average it and it tells you nothing. And here's the scariest part, his students have figured out the game and they are they know how to play it, and they are entertained by the system and its dysfunction. That's why we're seeing it a lot here, is students are choosing not to go to higher ed, but to create their own gig path, meaning their own personalized learning model that will move them forward. And we have had, and so I was thinking about, the question earlier, in Bangladesh, what might one do to deal with the power structure? Well, it would be getting people around a table, and it would be, what happens when higher ed gets together with business and industry and a local community, and you just put the cards on the table and basically say, what could we co-create together that incentivizes a better economy and a higher quality of life for our community? And so what has happened for the last, 6, 7 years, I've worked with an institution right here, which basically the students are working in the community with business and industry on projects that are all backward mapped to academic standards, but the whole thing is set up on, and what impact are we having for the quality of life in our community? Well, suddenly you get all the models of outcomes all in front of you. And it's in that point where, having interviewed them several times now over the years, finished a couple months ago, we asked the students, so what has this experience been like for you in terms of this learning model? They said, well, first of all, our school doesn't operate this way. I'm so glad I'm here, because our schools operate where teachers just dole out assignments and give you points and average them, and then we move on to doing it again and again and again. It's killing us. But in this, I come to understand my community, how things work, but more importantly, I come to understand myself as a learner. And so the question was posed to a student, what's been the biggest takeaway in working in this environment? He said, I used to think it was the projects that we worked on with business, industry, and the community. But then I figured out I was the project working on myself. And when they get to that point, everything changes. So when you pull the plug, you start thinking about grading and all those kinds of things. This is about what contribution could Bangladesh or any small group of people anywhere on the planet, what could it do to impact the world? It would convene a group of community, because without community, you have no school. Without community, you don't have anything. I was in a community college. If there's no community, there's no college. And what are we supposed to do? Prepare people for the world that is in that, what they call the VUCA state, volatile, uncertain, complex, and with a lot of ambiguity. A certainty system that we've been running for decades is being felt by the learners and does not transfer into reality. Reality creates meaning for all of us in real time. Reality creates meaning tied directly to our present state of human development. You cannot change anything that you are unaware of. And so this awareness and carrying the torch, it can occur anywhere. Why not Bangladesh? Why not
Yep.
Cedar Rapids, Iowa? Who knows?
Thank you, Al. Bravo. Anything else?
Excellent, excellent.
Mr. Sarwar?
Excellent. Yes,
You're
yes.
in charge.
Excellent. I think the last piece of advice was very important for us, at least from chapter's perspective. And the overall session, it was so excellent. I think a book can be written from here. This is fantastic. It is already being recorded, and maybe we will be trying to. I must admit that so much of solid thoughts and solid propositions. It is really, we must admit that it is really very difficult for us to carry such a huge responsibility to infuse these ideas into our community, but we'll try our level best. And of course, we do not have any words or anything else to give you thanks that you are giving so much of time and giving. I must also admit that you're putting importance on these questionnaires. I believe that even the questionnaire did not have any understanding or any idea or imagination that you and your group will be so much focusing onto giving these replies, and we are really obliged and grateful. But please, I hope that we will be able to take these things from you and to spread it into our community. Thank you, Bill, and thank you all the professors for being here so late at night in some parts of your staying. Thank you.
Let me thank you. Let me just add that a book has already been written. In fact, there are 2 books written.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
I have a book that came out just several months ago. It's available on Amazon.com and in online version.
Okay.
It's called Outcome-Based Education's Empowering Essence. And it deals with many of the issues that we have been dealing with here today. And it shows the frameworks and the models and tells the history of how this all unfolded. So that's something that people can get. It is not a high-priced book. And the e-version, I think, is quite inexpensive. The other book
yes.
is one we have developed that Wajid was part of, which is called Beyond Outcomes Accreditation. And it lays out a lot of the fundamental ideas about OBE and how the accreditation models do not embody them, and what they could do to improve the models and improve accreditation practices. So there are 2 books available, and I'm sure there will be more coming, but thank you for the reminder. And yes, this team could write an encyclopedia. Okay, this is a powerful team with amazing experiences, expertise, decades of practice and implementation and thinking about this. And I am delighted on behalf of the team that your chapter and your country are such a receptive audience for our work. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I look forward to moving forward.
In the meantime, Mr. Munir, are you here? or Professor Motahar,
Yes, please.
can you take an initiative? Please arrange our university library
Mhm.
to
Okay.
get these books.
Yeah,
First of all, within our collection, and also we have a good list of participants in our first and second events. We can send an email by specifying that there are 2 books, and we are making some arrangement to get these books. If those university libraries are interested to get those books, so they can express their interest, so that we can connect our importing agency to them. So I think this will, in a way, will start our participating people to go through the things. Please let us take this initiative.
Okay,
Yeah.
noted with thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Okay, you're
Yeah.
welcome. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Are we ready to conclude?
Yes. And and
All right.
really appreciate your energy at this stage. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
indeed. Well, thank you
Thank you.
all. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
team. Thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.